A very excellent source of American soccer content is Club 11 magazine. And last year they did a 12,000-mile road trip in an old school bus turned into a soccer museum. And now they have a podcast detailing that wild trip. Pablo, Club 11, welcome into Morning Kickaround.
Hey, Robert, Jason, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Shout out to all the MK Ultras. And I saw some familiar faces or familiar names in the chat. So shout out to Tom, the soccer zombie, fellow road warrior. We didn't get to meet on the road, unfortunately, last year, but I'm hoping that this 2026 season our paths will cross. But very excited to be here this morning. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you coming by, Pablo. I also missed you. I'm in DC. I think you guys were in DC at one point. And I had travel or something. I think I told Rob, my wife is Puerto Rican. It's like, we got to go to Puerto Rico. Man, I miss Club 11's going to be here. That stinks. But obviously, we're fans of what you're doing. I mean, I subscribe to the newsletter. I get that whenever you guys drop it. It is incredible. I would highly recommend it to anybody who's interested in just, stories and history and culture around the game. Just this recent issues got something about the 1966 World Cup and Stanley Kubrick. There's Sydney Sweeney is making an appearance in this newsletter. So give us a thumbnail sketch, Pablo, like what Club 11's all about.
Yeah. I think it would. I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, but I think it would be helpful, I guess, to go back to when we started back in 2018, and then I guess finish to how we ended up having 1998 Thomas School was that we ended up turning into a mobile soccer museum. But yeah, we actually started in DC. At first, it was just my twin brother and I. It was our first year of college at the University of Maryland, and it was a year that Wayne Rooney had come to play for DC United. And at the time, we'd been to a few games at RFK. But then obviously when Audi Field opened up and Wayne Rooney came to the city, we were super excited. And my brother just applied to get a credential to photograph the game. He had never really done sports photography before. But we created Club 11. He was able to get in and photograph the game. And then for me, I always really enjoyed writing and telling stories about the game. So he would upload the photos that he would take on every match day. And then I would just write a little caption about any of the players that he was highlighting. And then from there, it was pretty funny that I think from people from across the country, other photographers and writers that hadn't really covered the game before also started reaching out like, hey, how are you guys getting into games? How are you covering stuff in DC? And then we're like, yeah, so, you can apply as Club 11 and kind of cover, the games or soccer in your own communities. And we'll just put it all on this page and kind of show all these little things that are happening around the country. So before the pandemic, we were in 10 different cities covering NWSL, USL, MLS, international friendlies, the whole thing. And then when the pandemic happened, it was just like, oh man, what do we do? There was a lot of limited access in order to get into the games and all of that. And for me, I grew up in Peru until I was 10 years old. And I try to think back of what made me fall in love with the Peruvian league, which I still watch to this day. But it's pretty funny that it isn't the greatest league in the world, if I'm being completely honest. But I just thought back to my childhood and try to think of, hey, why did I become such a big fan of this league when maybe the best players in the world don't necessarily play here? And when I was thinking back to that, I felt like I was connected to the players because I felt like I knew who they were as humans. I felt like I knew all the struggles that they had gone through to get to the professional level and achieve their dreams. So we just thought hey, it would be cool if we could do something like that here in the US, try to tell the stories of the players and people who are involved with the sport here in North America. And then from there, we kind of started doing a lot more of editorial content. So doing editorial pieces, photo shoots with the players. And then eventually that evolved into doing video stuff with them as well to tell these stories. And that we kind of continued doing that since 2021. And then in 2025, we thought, okay, it's always been a dream of ours to come out with a print magazine. So that's kind of how the Soccer Odyssey came about. And we wanted to do 11 stories that kind of encapsulated what the American soccer space looked like before this watershed moment that everybody has been talking about, the 2026 World Cup. And we kind of wanted it to be a time capsule of what everything looked like right before this big moment that I think throughout our entire lives, everybody was going to change the sport here in the US. So we did, our cover star was Tim Weah. We were able to work with him when he was still in Turin. We did stuff with USL players, NWSL players, executives, refs, fans, and then put it all into this one magazine. And then we thought, okay, we want to take this magazine across the country and share these stories with as many people as possible. And that's how the idea of the bus came to be. We ended up buying the bus off Facebook Marketplace. It actually used to be somebody's mobile home. And they had a kitchen, they had a shower. I mean, they were basically like living there. And we were able to buy it off Facebook Marketplace, and we took apart the inside, put up wooden shelving all over, and then filled it with our collection of stuff that all of us had kind of had over the years. And then we're just like, okay, we'll take this magazine on the road. And then from there, it actually kind of evolved into this thing where after a couple stops, we realized like, hey, people are really enjoying the stuff that is inside the collection, the museum. And then we saw that people were just going into the bus and they were like, hey, I would love to, I have this stuff sitting in my garage, in my closet, in the trunk of my car. And I would just rather you guys have it and showcase it somewhere down the road.
Wow. Oh, okay. That's great.
So that's kind of how the bus came to be. And it's 12,000 miles. I think we did over 20 different cities, and we kind of for the main tour that we thought for the bus, we wanted to keep it Open Cup tied, just because of how much it meant to us as an organization, and obviously like what the cup means to, I think, everybody in America, right? I mean, it's the oldest sports competition that is still alive to this day. So we thought like, yeah, I mean, absolutely, we need to follow the Open Cup. And then I think it also allowed us that in between rounds, there was during the summer and then towards the end of the tournament, there was a lot of open space. So we could also do a lot of stuff with different MLS teams and WSL teams and all of that. So I think that's a little bit of background on Club 11 and the bus itself and how all of that got started.
Yeah, there's so many ways to interact with your guys' stuff. Like you're kind of documenting the history of it. You've collected history of it from folks you've met, but you also have like kind of the road trip adventure travel log aspect to it. What has been of the travel log going across the country last year in the van? What was something that you learned or discovered in that journey that you maybe weren't expecting?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just one of those things where it was funny because it was the Open Cup, right? So you get the most diehard fans that are coming out on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And I thought that what we were going to find was going to be those people that have been following the sport for years, right? And people that are very, very dedicated. And that was primarily the type of fan that we found across the country. But then one very interesting thing that I really didn't expect was that a lot of these games, sometimes you would find people that had never gone to a soccer game before. And I think one example that I always love to mention is it was the first stop that we did, which was in Asheville, North Carolina, and it was their first game since Hurricane Helene. So it was a very special moment for the whole community, and I mean the whole city was at that game, and it was one of those things where the field that they play in, it only has one stand, and then the rest of it is just like roped off. So it's like just the entire city is just standing next to the field. On one side, there's like the woods, and then on the other side, it's college dorms. So it's like we even went up to the college dorms to watch the game with some of the college kids and see what the view was from up there. But then they also had like a little hill behind one of the goals. And I remember walking up that hill, and I had my camera, and then, somebody just comes up to me and asks me like, hey, like, what are you doing here? What are you covering? And we get to talking, and I tell him like, yeah, it's like very exciting time for soccer here. The World Cup is coming next year. And this guy had no idea that the World Cup was happening in the US in 2026. So I just asked him like, what are you doing here at this Open Cup game on a Tuesday night? And he just tells me, he's like, yeah, my kid and all his friends who play on the local soccer team, they begged all of us parents to come and watch this game. So I'm here and I'm actually having a fantastic time. So I think that's a good example of the type of fan that also we were able to find throughout this road trip, is that there were a lot of people that sometimes had never even watched soccer, and they were there like at these games. I remember in Austin as well, chatting with someone in a parking lot of Soccer Post ATX, which is a store over there in Austin. And they were telling us how they became a fan in 2022, but they had never followed the game before. It was their first time going to a game, and that now they're best friends with everybody in the community. They go out to every game. They go out and volunteer and do good stuff for their community. with the rest of the fans. So I think that was something that I kind of didn't expect to find. It's just a lot of new fans that are kind of coming into the sport in a lot of different touch points, whether it's the Open Cup, whether it's at MLS games. And yeah, I mean, that was very unexpected.
Yeah, I mean, like it must be. I wish I was in a position to take a tour like that around the country, something I never got to do. I already had family and responsibilities that kept me locked down. I have been able to travel a little bit, but that thing about this country being so untapped that way, or still discovering the game. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, Pablo. Like I started as a blogger, and you know became a podcaster, who became a whatever I am now, radio guy and all this stuff. And it's still like we've taken big steps. The game has grown so dramatically, and yet we still have this subculture vibe. And like sometimes I'm one of those people who's like, oh man, I really wish soccer was massive, and I really wish football in this country, you know, that we had the same kind of love for the game that maybe we see in Peru and places like that. But at the same time, we would lose something, I think, if it did move to that level. And I love that there's something like you guys can start something like Club 11 kind of on a whim almost, and it become what it is. What are we, 8 years into this? I don't know that happens in a lot of other soccer loving countries. So I think that's fun. Like I'm glad that you have this opportunity, and also, yeah, we need to be connecting people to the game. I love what you guys are doing.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it, Jason. And I think you mentioned, I think you said in a couple episodes ago of how soccer here is kind of like the Wild West, which obviously, you know, I think sometimes can be a little bit of a negative, but then it also brings this whole positivity of like, yeah, there is like a lot of stuff that we can do. I think we did a trip to the UK a couple weeks ago. And I remember we went to visit this guy who lives right in front of Stamford Bridge. So it's like you climb up to his apartment, and the first thing he sees every morning is he wakes up, and the window that he sees is just a direct shot to the front entrance of Stamford Bridge. And he does this thing where every match day he just puts out speakers in front of his window and a little DJ table, and he just DJs for everybody who's kind of walking down to go to a Chelsea match. And we're just asking him like, yeah, you know, what has the reception been, like all of that. And he was telling us, yeah, like some of the more traditional fans don't really enjoy what we're doing, which was kind of weird to think about, because to me, I was like, this is the coolest thing I've seen in my life. And then later on, we visit a pub in London as well called The Volley. And we walk in, and it's this place that's covered with scarves and memorabilia all over. It was funny. He had a Sac Republic scarf, Racing Louisville scarf, like American posters. Like it was a really interesting place. And we were talking to him as well. And he says, yeah, you know, I think some people here think this is just for like hipsters, and more of the traditional fan bases don't necessarily vibe too much with what I have going on here. And then I think to our culture here in the US, and it's just like a lot of people, whether they have a background in music, a background in fashion, a background in anything, and they're bringing all these things into the sport. So I think it's a really interesting time to kind of live through soccer right now, because you can bring all these different passions and boom.
Less cultural.
I know this might be a thing for us to talk about in a different setting for a much longer amount of time, Pablo. But you know, I love these conversations. So like I said, my wife is Puerto Rican, and obviously soccer's growing in Puerto Rico like it's growing here, but it's not the sport. So my cousin-in-law was here visiting, and I'm working on my Spanish, and he's asking me questions about my job, and he's not a soccer, like he's aware of it. Like he's asking me who's better, Messi or Ronaldo, because everybody has to ask you who's better, Messi or Ronaldo. So I'm having this conversation with him, and I'm trying to explain to him, like, the thing about our country is that we have millions and millions and millions of soccer fans in this country. What we don't have is a unified soccer culture. Like we don't have one focal point. We don't have the league everybody's watching, because we're all watching different leagues. Like I know you have some MLS love, but you're also connected to Peru in a way that means you're paying very close attention to what's happening down there. And that's true of so many different cultures. Like the breadth of our diversity means that we're all spread out very thin. American soccer is not super deep. It's very thinly spread out. But that also is like so unique and special in ways that we need to explore too.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that was also one eye-opening thing from this whole road trip that we've been doing, is that, you know, sometimes you're at a USL2 match, and obviously the person that's there really cares about USL2, and maybe they don't watch Premier League. And then this other thing that we started doing was in the mornings, since most of the work that we do is in the afternoons or at night, we're just like, hey, let's hop to the pub that's, downtown and see if people are watching the Premier League. And then you see all these places around the country that are just absolutely packed, and it's people that really, really care about the Premier League. Then there's also a type of fan that cares about the Premier League and maybe their USL Championship side as well. So yeah, I think in terms of the way that you've described it is really accurate to what we've seen around the country, because there isn't that one unified thing. It's just, it seems like fans just kind of, in whichever way they can get their hands into soccer, they have gotten into that. And
do you see that? Do you see that as, I do think there's a beauty. I've come to accept it, right? Well, I guess that's kind of what it is, because again, I don't know if I need to always be a soccer booster, and then it's very important that, say, MLS become a top league. I don't know. Sometimes I ask people directly, why do you care if MLS is one of the best leagues in the world? Why is that important to you? If you have a connection to your team in your town, why does it matter? You're watching the Peruvian league, and you don't care if they're winning Copa Libertadores or they're as good as Chelsea. You just care that they win their league because it matters to you in that place. And I don't know, do you see it as a problem to solve in any particular way? I mean, because again, if you guys are trying to grow Club 11, which is, about the artistic expression and the passion, but also you want to be able to live, right? And buy a car and live and pay your rent and stuff like that. If you're trying to grow a business, do you see it as a problem? Because I see so many people trying to tackle this idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because we're kind of working on a project that we'll be unveiling, I think, in a couple months, that's related to the Open Cup journey that we did. And we're working with Pablo Bayona. He wrote a little something for the project, and it was a beautiful piece. And then towards the end, he kind of talks about, the history of the game and how it's been othered for a really long time. It's been kind of this subculture around the country, counterculture a little bit. And he reaches a conclusion of, maybe that is the point at the end of the day. We don't need to necessarily become the water cooler talker, the main thing. There is a beauty in kind of having it be this countercultural thing where we can all love it in different ways, and it doesn't necessarily need to be homogenous and kind of become this dominant culture necessarily. And I think as well, that has been one thing from the road trip that again, I think we found is that, people are falling in love with the game in so many different ways, but a lot of times, the headlines and the stuff that's going out in these big media networks doesn't necessarily reflect the things that you see on the ground. I think there's a lot of fans around the country that, maybe don't showcase it to the world or broadcast it to the world that they're soccer fans. But at the end of the day, they're showing up to watch their local team with their neighbors. And you're seeing this in places that you wouldn't necessarily expect, or places where, again, big legacy media maybe isn't necessarily putting their focus on. So I think that's been something really interesting to see across the country, that it's I have seen all these little fires across the country kind of sprouting about. But a lot of times it doesn't necessarily get that attention. But yeah.
Before we let you go, you said earlier that the road trip was in large part to document soccer in the United States as it is before this watershed moment that is supposed to be the World Cup 2026. So how are you guys tackling the behemoth, as complicated as it is, that's coming here, the World Cup in the summer?
Yeah, I think that's it was very interesting, because I think in 2025, obviously, we got to see very firsthand of all these different things that are happening in cities that people wouldn't consider major markets, or in cities that aren't going to be hosting a World Cup game. So I think for us, it's obviously trying to do the type of coverage that we've done for Copa America, Club World Cup, all these other international tournaments that have happened over the past few years. So obviously, if we're able to get into the tournament, cover it from a photography side of things on everything that's happening inside the stadium. But I think for us, a lot of the focus is covering all the stuff that is happening outside the stadiums and happening in all these other cities that will be celebrating the World Cup, but aren't necessarily hosting a game. I always like to think back of some of the coverage that we did for the 2022 World Cup when, we obviously didn't have the budget to go over to Qatar and cover that tournament at all. But it was one of those things where all of us at Club 11, we kind of made this challenge of like, okay, every match day, we're going to try to go to a restaurant of a team that's participating at this World Cup. So we were able to, cover an Ecuadorian restaurant on the opening day, go to a Moroccan restaurant as they kept progressing through the tournament. And it was very eye-opening to see how, all these communities, they're gathering in all these restaurants, in all these community places. And you can find, what you will find at a stadium, you can find it in all these places as well. So we want to cover that as well and highlight it in a way that, people can kind of see around the country of all this stuff is happening. Not everything has to be inside the stadium. And then, of course, with the bus, hoping to do a road trip as well with that. We're still finalizing the details of what that would look like exactly. But I think we trying to go all out, a big push during this World Cup, because I think it's something that we've been looking forward to since 2018. So it'll be a huge summer, I think. So, yeah.
Well, Pablo, thank you so much for stopping by with us here on Morning Kickaround. And thank you for putting in all this effort in and the content you guys are creating over at Club 11. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, really appreciate it. And of course, if anybody wants to keep up with our travels, we have our podcast now where we, just all the stuff that we see on the ground. It gives us a way to I guess, tell that to everybody, anybody who is interested in listening and kind of keep up with our findings on the ground. So
no, look, podcasts have always been audio. Now where everybody's doing it on video. I'll say it is awesome to watch Club 11 do their podcast. They do it in front of the bus, so their backdrop is incredible. I love it, Pablo. Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you on the road at some point, and we can give you a tour of the bus whenever we roll through where you guys are.